Little girls begged, "Don't let mommy hurt us again." What the millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It was a cold December evening, and the busy city streets were filled with holiday cheer. Christmas lights shimmered in the distance, decorating the buildings like festive ornaments. However, inside the luxurious office of Jackson Reed, the CEO of Reed Enterprises, the scene was much different. The sterile, glass-paneled office was quiet, cold, and lifeless, the only warmth coming from the glow of the computer screen in front of him. Jackson, a self-made billionaire, was used to the hustle and bustle of his empire. But in this moment, he felt utterly alone. His phone buzzed with another reminder of how isolated he was. Another message from his assistant, another report, another corporate task. The world outside was celebrating, but inside his high-rise tower, Jackson's heart was empty. The sounds of the city, the laughter, the holiday music, felt miles away, as if they belonged to a different world, a world he was no longer part of. It was moments like these that reminded Jackson of how little he had in his life. He had the money, the success, the power, but no one to share it with. That night, as he walked down the cold, empty city streets after a long day, something strange caught his attention. Two small figures were huddled together in the shadows near a dimly lit alleyway. Jackson paused, his breath visible in the crisp air, a pang of unease settling in his chest. At first, he thought it was just another couple of homeless individuals seeking shelter, but as he stepped closer, he noticed something different. The figures were small, too small. As his gaze sharpened, he could see the outline of a little girl, clutching something in her arms. The other figure, a baby, was swaddled in a tattered blanket, barely moving. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't just walk away. Not this time. His feet moved on their own, his body acting before his mind could catch up. He crouched down, his sharp suit now gathering the dust of the alley. The little girl looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Please, don't take her back," she whispered, her voice cracking with fear. Jackson froze. The words hit him like a punch in the gut. He looked down at the baby in her arms, her tiny body shivering from the cold. It was clear they were both in need of help, but the urgency in the girl's voice, the pleading, the fear, left Jackson momentarily speechless. "Who did this to you?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer, just clutched the baby tighter. Jackson's heart ached as he realized the depth of their pain. He couldn't leave them here. Not like this. Without another thought, he gently lifted the girl in his arms, wrapping her in his coat, and cradled the baby in his other arm. "You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you again," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. As he walked back to his car, the harsh lights of the city flickered in the distance, but all he could focus on were the two little lives in his arms. This wasn't just an act of charity. This was a promise. A promise that he would do everything in his power to make sure they were never hurt again. For the first time in a long time, Jackson felt something stir inside him. A spark of empathy, of human connection. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Asterisk, asterisk. Little girls begged, "Don't let mommy hurt us again." What the millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Jackson Reed could hardly believe what was happening. He had only just picked up the two little girls from the dark alley, and now they were sitting in the back seat of his luxury car, wrapped in his coat, their small bodies still trembling from the cold. The baby was quietly resting in the girl's arms, a peaceful contrast to the chaos of the streets they had just come from. Jackson stared ahead through the windshield, his hands gripping the wheel, trying to calm his racing thoughts. What kind of world was it where children had to endure such pain? He glanced at the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the little girl's face. She was no older than 6 or 7, her eyes wide and still full of fear. Yet there was a strange, quiet strength in her gaze. She hadn't said much since he found her, only a few whispered words. But those words had pierced his heart. "Please don't take her back," she had begged him. Jackson felt his chest tighten. He had been moved by his compassion. Yes, but there was more to it than that. Something about her words, her voice, triggered a deep memory. He had seen that kind of fear before, and it was a fear that never truly left. His mind began to race, trying to piece together the puzzle of these two girls, wondering if this was just an isolated incident or part of something bigger. As the car sped toward the hospital, he found himself wondering who would hurt a child like this. What kind of parent would do this? The answer, Jackson feared, was all too familiar. His own childhood had been marked by a similar coldness. His parents, despite their wealth, had been distant, emotionally unavailable. He had grown up surrounded by luxury, but it was a luxury that felt hollow, like a mansion with no warmth. He had never known love in the way that most people did. His achievements in life had filled the empty spaces, but they never quite erased the loneliness that had been with him from the start. He had built an empire, but it hadn't come with a family. He had made millions, but it hadn't filled the hole in his heart. He glanced at the rearview mirror again, his gaze lingering on the little girl. She was staring at him, her expression unreadable, as if she was trying to figure him out. "What's your name?" Jackson asked softly, his voice almost a whisper. The girl hesitated for a moment before answering. "Lily," she said, her voice small and fragile. "And her name is Grace," she added, nodding to the baby in her arms. Jackson felt a lump form in his throat. He had only known them for a short time, but already he felt an undeniable connection. He had never expected to feel this way, to care about someone else's pain so deeply. As they reached the hospital, Jackson's mind was still spinning. The situation was beyond his understanding, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't just let them go. He couldn't leave them to face whatever nightmare awaited them. He pulled up to the emergency entrance, the hospital doors sliding open automatically as he got out of the car. He quickly scooped Lily and Grace into his arms, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on him. The nurses rushed to meet him, and without question, they took the girls inside. Jackson stood frozen in the cold, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just about helping two children. This was about redemption, about making up for the things he had failed to do in his own life. For the first time, in a long time, Jackson felt like he had a purpose. The doctor, after examining Grace, gave Jackson a grim look. "She's very weak," the doctor said. "We'll need to run some tests, but she's been through a lot." Jackson nodded, his mind reeling. He had no idea what had happened to these girls, but he was going to make sure they were safe from now on. He couldn't let them go back to that place. He couldn't let them go back to that mother. "I'll stay with them," Jackson said, his voice firm. He knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The moment he stepped into the hospital room, with Lily and Grace by his side, Jackson knew that his life was about to change in ways he could never have predicted. Asterisk, asterisk. Little girls begged, "Don't let mommy hurt us again." What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Jackson sat in the waiting room of the hospital, his hands clenched tightly together in his lap. He could hear the soft murmur of nurses talking, the distant beeping of monitors, and the occasional cough from another patient. But through it all, his mind was racing. He couldn't stop thinking about Lily and Grace, the two little girls who had shown up in his life out of nowhere, clutching each other for dear life, begging for help. As the hours passed, Jackson found himself growing more and more impatient. The doctors had assured him that Grace would be fine, but something about the situation still didn't sit right with him. He had grown up surrounded by wealth and power. But this was something different. The fear in Lily's eyes, the way she held on to her baby sister as if her life depended on it, was enough to break anyone's heart. And the words she had said to him earlier still echoed in his mind. "Please, don't take her back." He didn't know who they were running from, but Jackson knew one thing for sure: he couldn't let them go back to whatever hell they had come from. Just then, the door to the waiting room opened, and a nurse stepped inside, her face serious. "Mr. Reed," she asked. Jackson stood up quickly, his heart racing. "How are they?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. "Grace is stable," the nurse said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "She's still very weak, but she's out of immediate danger. Lily's doing better too. She's resting in the other room." Jackson nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. He knew it wasn't over yet, but at least they were safe for now. "Can I see them?" he asked. The nurse nodded. "Of course. Follow me." Jackson followed the nurse down the sterile hallway, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing softly. As they turned the corner, he saw Lily sitting on a hospital bed, her small frame curled up under the blankets. Her eyes were closed, but Jackson could see the faint traces of tears on her cheeks. He approached her cautiously, unsure of what to say. "Lily?" he said softly. The little girl's eyes fluttered open, and she looked at him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. "Are you okay?" Jackson asked gently, taking a seat beside her. Lily nodded slightly, but didn't speak. Instead, she glanced over at the crib in the corner, where Grace was sleeping soundly. Jackson followed her gaze and saw the tiny form of the baby, wrapped in a soft blanket. He couldn't help but feel a surge of protectiveness for both of them. He had promised them safety, but the truth was, he had no idea what he was really up against. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," Jackson said, his voice firm but comforting. "I won't let anything happen to you or Grace. I promise." Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide and trusting, but there was still something guarded in her expression. She had been through too much to let her guard down completely, and Jackson understood that. He hadn't earned her trust yet, not fully, but he would. He had to, for her, for Grace, and for the sake of his own redemption. As he sat there, lost in his thoughts, The door to the room opened again, and the doctor entered. "Mr. Reed, we've completed our tests on Grace," the doctor said, his tone serious. "There are signs of malnutrition, and we've found some bruising, likely from being held too tightly, but nothing life-threatening at this point." Jackson felt his stomach turn at the mention of bruising. It wasn't the first time he had heard of abuse, but it never got any easier to hear. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked, his voice low. The doctor looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "We'll continue to monitor her, but for now, the best thing you can do is provide a safe environment. The trauma they've experienced, especially Lily, could take a while to heal. She'll need time, care, and patience." Jackson nodded, determined. He had no idea what he was getting into, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let these girls face another day of fear and pain. As the doctor left the room, Jackson turned back to Lily. He reached out and gently touched her hand, feeling the warmth of her small fingers. "You're safe now," he said softly, "and I'm going to make sure nothing ever hurts you again." Lily's eyes flickered with something between hope and disbelief, and for the first time, she offered him a faint smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Jackson knew that this was just the beginning. He had a long road ahead of him, but he was ready. For Lily, for Grace, and for himself. He had been lost for so long, but maybe, just maybe, he had finally found a reason to live with purpose. And no matter what it took, he was going to protect them. He wasn't going to let them go back to that life. Not ever again. Asterisk, asterisk. Little girls begged, "Don't let mommy hurt us again." What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Jackson spent the next few days at the hospital, keeping a vigil by Lily and Grace's side, waiting for them to heal physically and emotionally. The hospital room was quiet. The only sounds were the faint beeping of the monitors and the rustling of the sheets as Lily shifted uncomfortably in her bed. She still hadn't said much since that night in the alley. Jackson didn't push her to talk, knowing that the trauma she had endured would take time to process. He had his own demons, his own past that had shaped him into the man he was today. But nothing in his life had prepared him for the devastation he had seen in these little girls. Every time he looked at them, he saw a mirror reflecting his own childhood. A childhood marked by neglect, by the absence of love. But unlike him, Lily and Grace didn't have the luxury of time to heal. They needed help now. The doctors had been reassuring, but Jackson could see the truth in their eyes. Grace was still too fragile, and Lily was holding on to something far deeper than just physical pain. Jackson knew he had to act fast. One evening, as he sat in the sterile hospital chair, watching the girls sleep, he received a call from his lawyer. The voice on the other end was calm, but the message was urgent. "Jackson, we need to talk about custody," the lawyer said. "The biological mother is demanding the girls be returned to her care." Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. He had known this day would come, but he wasn't prepared for the gravity of the situation. The last thing he wanted was to return the girls to the woman who had caused them so much harm. "I won't let that happen," Jackson replied, his voice firm. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep them safe." The lawyer paused for a moment before responding. "I understand, but the legal system can be slow, and it's not always in our favor. We need to be prepared for a fight." Jackson hung up the phone, his heart racing. He knew this was only the beginning. He had promised Lily and Grace that they would be safe, but keeping that promise would be harder than he had ever imagined. As he looked at the girls, he realized that this was no longer just about doing the right thing. It was about protecting the only family he had ever truly cared for. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal battles, phone calls, and paperwork. Jackson threw himself into the fight, using every connection he had to ensure the girls would stay with him. He hired the best lawyers, even contacted private investigators to uncover everything about the girl's mother. What he discovered was even more shocking than he had anticipated. The woman had a long history of substance abuse, neglect, and violence. The authorities had been aware of her actions for years, but somehow, the system had failed to protect her children. As Jackson sat in his office one night, poring over the files, he felt a growing sense of anger and determination. He had built an empire, but it didn't matter if he couldn't protect the ones who mattered most. He couldn't let Lily and Grace go back to that life. He wouldn't allow it. The next day, he went to the hospital to check on the girls. Lily was sitting up in bed, her small hands clasped tightly around a stuffed bear. When she saw Jackson, her eyes softened, and for the first time in days, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it was enough to melt his heart. Jackson sat beside her and took her hand. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Lily shrugged. "Okay," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Jackson squeezed her hand, trying to offer comfort. "You're safe now, Lily," he said, his voice steady. "And no one is going to hurt you again. I promise you." Lily looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Will we stay with you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson felt his heart twist. He knew what she was really asking. She wasn't just asking if they would stay in his mansion. She was asking if they could finally have a home, a place where they wouldn't have to fear for their lives every day. "Yes, Lily," Jackson said softly. "You and Grace will stay with me. I'll take care of you both, no matter what." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded slowly, as if trying to process the promise he had made. Jackson could see the weight of the world in her small face, the burden of everything she had been through. But there was something else in her eyes now, a glimmer of hope, something she hadn't had before. As he looked at her, Jackson realized that he wasn't just saving the girls. They were saving him too. They were giving him a chance to heal, a chance to build the family he had always longed for. And no matter what it took, he would fight for that family. He would fight for them. No one would take them away from him. Not now. Not ever. Asterisk, asterisk. Little girls begged, "Don't let mommy hurt us again." What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal asterisk asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The days following Jackson's promise to Lily and Grace were not easy. As much as he wanted to shield them from everything they had suffered, the reality of their situation quickly became overwhelming. The custody battle was heating up, and the girl's biological mother, despite her history of abuse, was not backing down. Jackson had expected a fight, but nothing prepared him for the coldness and manipulation he witnessed when dealing with her lawyer. She had always been a master of playing the victim, and now she was trying to use her children as pawns in a game she had no right to play. Jackson knew he had to stay focused on what mattered Lily and Grace. But every time he saw the legal documents, Every time the lawyers tried to paint him as the villain, he felt a sharp pain. He had to protect them, no matter what. During this time, Jackson found himself spending more and more time with the girls. He kept them in his mansion, away from the prying eyes of the public and the toxic influence of their mother. He took them on small outings, to parks, museums, and even the beach. He wanted them to experience what it felt like to just be kids, to laugh, to play, to forget about the trauma they had endured for even a little while. Slowly, Lily began to open up to him. She wasn't as closed off as before. She would sit with him in the mornings, sipping hot cocoa, and tell him little stories about her life before she had been brought to him. She talked about the small things that meant the world to her. The way her mother's voice sounded when she was angry. The feeling of her baby sister's tiny fingers wrapped around hers. The coldness of the nights they spent hiding in corners, waiting for things to settle down. Grace, on the other hand, was still quiet. Her big brown eyes taking in everything with a deep, silent understanding. She was a baby, but she had already witnessed things no child should ever experience. Jackson knew it would take time for her to heal, but he would do whatever it took to help her feel safe. One evening, after dinner, Lily approached Jackson with something in her hand. It was a small drawing she had made of him, of her, of Grace. All of them standing together in front of a large house. There were little hearts scattered across the page and a sun shining brightly above them. The innocence of the drawing took Jackson by surprise. He had never expected such a simple act of trust from her. Lily handed it to him, her eyes searching his face for his reaction. "Do you like it?" she asked quietly. Jackson took the drawing in his hands, feeling a lump form in his throat. He hadn't realized how much this small gesture would mean to him. "I love it, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is the best gift I've ever received." Lily smiled shyly, then quickly turned away, hiding her face in her hands, embarrassed by her own gesture. But Jackson saw it, the little spark of hope that was finally starting to grow inside her. He wasn't just taking care of her and Grace. He was giving them something they hadn't had in so long. The feeling of being safe, of being loved. As the weeks passed, Jackson found himself growing closer to both girls. They were becoming more than just two children he had promised to protect. They were becoming his family. And for the first time in his life, Jackson felt the warmth of what it meant to be a father. The legal battle raged on, but Jackson knew he had to focus on what truly mattered, giving the girls the stability and love they deserved. The custody hearing was scheduled for the end of the month, and Jackson was prepared for a fight. But he wasn't going to do it alone. He had gathered a team of the best lawyers, private investigators, and child psychologists to build a case that would ensure Lily and Grace would never be forced back into their mother's care. The day of the hearing finally arrived, and Jackson stood in the courtroom, facing the judge. His heart was pounding in his chest, but he remained calm, his resolve unshaken. The girl's mother was seated across from him, her face cold, her eyes filled with resentment. Jackson could feel the weight of her gaze, but he didn't look away. He had made a promise to Lily and Grace, and he wasn't going to let anything break it. The hearing was long, drawn out, and emotionally charged. But in the end, Jackson's lawyers presented a powerful case. They highlighted the abuse, the neglect, and the years of harm that the girls had endured under their mother's care. They had the evidence, the testimonies, and the determination to fight for what was right. As the judge delivered the verdict, Jackson held his breath. It felt like the longest moment of his life. Finally, the judge looked at him and nodded. "The court finds in favor of Mr. Reed. The girls will remain in his care." Jackson felt his heart soar with relief. He had won. But it wasn't just a legal victory. It was a victory for Lily, for Grace, and for the family he had promised to protect. As he left the courtroom, Lily and Grace waiting for him, he knew one thing for sure. They were no longer just two little girls. He was helping. They were his daughters now, and he would fight for them. Every day. For the rest of his life. Asterisk. Asterisk. Little girls. Begged. Don't let mommy hurt us again. What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Asterisk. Asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Months passed since the court ruling, and life at Jackson's mansion began to take on a new rhythm. The days were filled with laughter, the sound of Grace's tiny giggles as she chased after Lily, and the warm mornings spent sitting together at the kitchen table, talking about their dreams and their future. Jackson had grown accustomed to this new life, and it was everything he had ever wanted, though he never knew it until now. The bond between him and the girls had only grown stronger with each passing day, and with each moment they shared, Jackson realized more and more how much they needed him and how much he needed them. But despite the peace and love that surrounded them, there was still a cloud hanging over their lives. Jackson knew the girls' past would always follow them, and though they had found safety in his home, there was still the looming shadow of their mother. Lily still had nightmares, and Grace was often quiet, her eyes filled with a sadness that even Jackson's best efforts couldn't erase. One evening as the sun set behind the hills, Jackson sat in his study, reviewing some documents when Lily came in. Her little face was serious, and for a moment, he thought something was wrong. "Dad?" she asked, her voice hesitant. The words still felt strange to him, but hearing it from her warmed his heart. He put the papers down and looked at her, giving her his full attention. "What's on your mind, Lily?" he asked gently. She bit her lip before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared," she said. Jackson's heart clenched at the words. "What are you scared of, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice soft, trying to hide the worry he felt. "Mommy," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. "She's going to come and take us away from you." Jackson felt a lump in his throat. He had known that Lily was still struggling with the fear of losing him, but hearing her say it out loud hit him harder than he expected. He took a deep breath, standing up and walking over to her. He knelt down to her level, brushing her hair back from her face. "Lily, I know you're scared," he said softly, "but I promise you, I will never let that happen. You and Grace are safe here with me. I won't let anyone hurt you again. Not ever." Lily looked at him with those big, trusting eyes, but Jackson could see the hesitation in her gaze. The fear was still there, lingering, like an old wound that hadn't fully healed. "But what if she comes?" Lily asked. Jackson paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "If she comes," he said firmly, "we will stand strong together. You don't have to worry. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you." He smiled at her, trying to reassure her, but in that moment, he realized something. The weight of their past would always be a part of them. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could promise them something that their mother never had: a future. As the days went on, Jackson focused on giving Lily and Grace the tools they needed to heal. He enrolled them in therapy, allowing them to speak about their past in a safe and supportive environment. He made sure they were surrounded by love, and he did his best to be there for every milestone, no matter how big or small. For Grace, it was the quiet moments when she would curl up on his lap as he read to her, or when she would fall asleep in his arms, safe and sound. For Lily, it was the way she began to smile again, the way her laughter would fill the house, and how she slowly began to trust him more and more each day. Jackson was amazed at how resilient the girls were, how strong they were, even when they didn't realize it. He was proud of them, proud of how far they had come, but there was still work to be done. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Jackson returned home to find Lily sitting in the living room, holding a small piece of paper. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking, "I made this for you." She handed him the paper, and Jackson took it from her, unrolling it to reveal a drawing. It was of him, standing with his arms around both Lily and Grace. The three of them were surrounded by hearts, the sun shining brightly above them. At the bottom, in crayon, were the words, "Our family." Jackson's eyes stung as he looked at the drawing, overwhelmed by the love and hope that Lily had put into it. He could see that this little girl, the one who had once been so afraid, was starting to believe in the possibility of a happy future. "Lily, this is beautiful," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I love it." Lily smiled, her eyes bright with pride. "It's us, Daddy. It's our family." Jackson felt a tear slip down his cheek, but he wiped it away quickly. He hadn't realized until that moment how much these girls had become a part of him, how much he had grown to love them. They weren't just two children he had rescued, they were his daughters, his family, and nothing could ever change that. He kissed her forehead and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Lily. You and Grace are my world." He held her for a moment longer, feeling the weight of his promise settle deep in his heart. No matter what happened, no matter how hard the road ahead might be, Jackson knew one thing for certain. His family was worth fighting for, and he would never stop fighting for them. Asterisk, asterisk. Little girls begged, "Don't let Mommy hurt us again." What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Months passed since Jackson won the custody battle for Lily and Grace, and life had settled into a comfortable routine. Yet, the scars from their past were still present, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be healed. Jackson continued to build a life with the girls, taking them to school, helping with their homework, and spending his weekends at the park or at their favorite bakery. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. It was the kind of family he had always longed for, even if he hadn't known it until now. However, one evening, while they were having dinner together, the calm that had enveloped their home was suddenly shattered. The doorbell rang. It was a sound that should have been innocent, but in that moment, it struck fear into Jackson's heart. He had grown accustomed to the quiet, to the warmth of their new life. But this was a reminder that their past was never far behind. He got up from the dinner table, glancing over at Lily and Grace, both of whom had grown silent at the sound of the bell. He knew they were afraid. They had every reason to be. When he opened the door, he was met by two strangers, a man and a woman. The woman was holding a stack of papers in her hands, and the man looked at Jackson with an expression that was both professional and cold. "Mr. Reed?" the man asked. Jackson's stomach tightened. "Yes," he replied cautiously. "We need to speak with you," the man continued. This is regarding the custody of Lily and Grace. The woman stepped forward, handing Jackson the stack of papers. His eyes scanned them quickly, and the words hit him like a punch. They were from the girl's biological mother, demanding a review of the custody decision, claiming that she was fit to care for them again. Jackson's blood ran cold. He had been prepared for this, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he hadn't anticipated her pushing so hard, so quickly. He had hoped she would give up, but this was a clear sign that she wouldn't. "What is this?" Jackson asked, his voice steady but firm. "A petition for custody reconsideration," the man answered, his tone clinical. "We've been instructed by the court to notify you of this request. A hearing is scheduled for next week." Jackson felt a rush of anger, but he quickly pushed it aside. He couldn't let his emotions take over. He had to focus on what was best for Lily and Grace. He looked back at the girls, who were now standing at the doorway, their faces filled with fear and confusion. "You're not going anywhere," Jackson said, his voice calm but resolute. "No matter what happens, I will protect you." The man and woman left after a few more formalities, and Jackson shut the door behind them. He stood there for a moment, gathering his thoughts. This wasn't just about legal documents and courts. It was about the safety of the two little girls who had come to trust him with their lives. Jackson knew this fight wasn't over. It would never be over as long as their mother was still in the picture. But he wasn't going to let her take them. He couldn't. The next day, Jackson called his lawyer. He needed to be prepared. The hearing was only days away, and he couldn't afford to lose. The lawyer assured him they would have the best case possible, but there was a sense of urgency in the air. Jackson knew that they had to make sure Lily and Grace were protected, no matter what it took. He spent the following days reviewing everything: the evidence, the testimonies, the support he had from doctors and child psychologists. He had to make sure the judge understood that their mother's past wasn't something that could be ignored. He couldn't let them go back to that. The night before the hearing, Jackson sat with Lily and Grace. They were sitting on the couch, huddled together under a blanket, watching a movie. Jackson had no idea what was going through their minds, but he could feel the unease radiating off of them. Lily, ever perceptive, looked up at him. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked softly. Jackson smiled, trying to reassure her. "Yes, Lily," he said, his voice steady. "You and Grace are going to be just fine. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." Lily nodded, but there was still a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Jackson could see the fear she was trying to hide, and it hurt him more than he cared to admit. He had promised to keep them safe, and he would keep that promise, no matter the cost. The next morning, they all went to the courthouse. Jackson could feel the tension in the air as they walked through the halls. Lily clutched his hand tightly, and Grace, though still too young to fully understand, seemed to sense the seriousness of the situation. They sat in the courtroom, waiting for the hearing to begin. The doors opened, and the bailiff called the case. Jackson stood up, holding Lily and Grace's hands as they walked toward the judge. As the hearing proceeded, Jackson felt his heart pounding in his chest. Every word, every piece of evidence was a step toward securing their future. He wouldn't let their past define them. And when the judge finally spoke, Jackson breathed a sigh of relief. "The court finds in favor of Mr. Reed," the judge said. "The custody arrangement remains unchanged. Lily and Grace will remain in his care." Jackson held back tears of relief. He had won, but it wasn't just a legal victory. It was a victory for Lily and Grace, for their future, and for the family they had built together. As they walked out of the courtroom, Jackson looked down at the girls, who were now smiling, their faces filled with hope. "We're going to be okay," he said, his voice full of certainty. We're a family, and nothing is going to tear us apart. Asterisk, asterisk, little girls begged. Don't let mommy hurt us again. What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The day after the custody hearing was over, Jackson sat in his office, staring at the papers before him, but his mind wasn't on the contracts or business deals he was usually so focused on. He had won the case, but it hadn't been an easy victory. His heart felt heavy with the weight of the promise he had made to Lily and Grace. Yes, they were safe for now, but he knew that their healing had only just begun. Jackson had become their protector, their guardian, and for the first time in his life, he realized what it meant to be truly needed by someone. But the healing wasn't just about keeping them physically safe. It was about helping them move past the trauma that had haunted them for so long. It was about showing them that they could trust again, that love and care weren't just words, they were actions. One afternoon, as Jackson was walking through the house, he overheard Lily and Grace in the living room. Their voices soft, but filled with the kind of sincerity that only children could express. He paused, not wanting to interrupt, but also wanting to hear what they were saying. I think I want to learn how to ride a bike, Lily said. Jackson could hear the excitement in her voice, but there was also a hint of uncertainty. I'm too scared to fall, she admitted. Grace, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke up. I'll help you, Lily, she said, her voice firm, in a way that was far beyond her years. We can fall together, but we'll get up again. Jackson smiled to himself, standing at the doorway, watching the two girls. It was moments like this that made him realize how much they had grown. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living. They were dreaming. And they were starting to feel safe. They were becoming children again. That evening, Jackson decided to take them to the park. It was a beautiful day, warm, with just a hint of breeze, and he knew it was the perfect time to let them enjoy the simple things in life. They arrived at the park, and Lily immediately ran toward the swings. Grace followed, but her steps were a little slower. She had always been the more cautious of the two. Jackson stood back, watching them, but he couldn't help feeling a deep sense of pride. These girls had come so far from the frightened, withdrawn children he had met. They were thriving, and every day, they were showing him more and more just how resilient they were. He had worried about what would happen after the court battle was over. But now, watching them play, he felt a quiet peace settle over him. As the sun began to set, the park slowly emptied out, leaving just Jackson and the girls. Lily came running up to him, her face flushed with joy. I did it, Dad! I did it! She shouted, her arms raised in triumph. Jackson's heart swelled with pride. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart, he said, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around. You're amazing. Grace joined them, a small smile on her face as she watched her sister. Jackson noticed how much more relaxed she looked, the tension that had once clouded her expression slowly fading away. I think I'm ready to try too, Grace said, her voice softer than Lily's, but filled with the same quiet determination. Jackson placed Lily down and gently took Grace's hand. Together, they walked over to the bike rack, and Jackson helped Grace onto a small bike, holding the handlebars steady. You've got this, Grace, he said, his voice warm and reassuring. For the next hour, they worked together. Lily, confident after her success on the swing, was now cheering her sister on, running alongside her. "You're doing great, Grace," she encouraged. Jackson kept his hand steady on the bike as Grace pedaled slowly, gaining confidence with each movement. There were a few wobbles, but each time Jackson was there, holding on just enough to keep her from falling. And when she finally rode on her own, her face lit up with the brightest smile Jackson had ever seen. "I did it," Grace shouted, laughing with pure joy. "I knew you could," Jackson said, his voice thick with emotion. It wasn't just the achievement of riding a bike. It was the realization that they were beginning to trust the world again. They were learning to fall, but more importantly, they were learning to get back up. That night, as they settled into bed, Lily and Grace curled up together. Jackson kissed them both good night. As he turned to leave the room, he heard Lily's voice call out to him. "Dad?" she said softly. Jackson turned back, his heart full. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad we have you," she said. Grace nodded, her eyes soft and trusting. "We're not scared anymore," she added quietly. Jackson stood there, frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of their words. He didn't know if he would ever be able to put into words how much those words meant to him. But one thing was certain: he had found the family he had always wanted. And no matter what happened in the future, he would always be there for them. His promise was real. His love was real. And together, they had built something that could never be taken away. For the first time in his life, Jackson felt whole, surrounded by the two little girls who had healed him just as much as he had healed them. Asterisk, asterisk. Little girls begged, "Don't let mommy hurt us again." What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal asterisk asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. As the months went by, Jackson continued to pour his heart into building a life with Lily and Grace. The once empty mansion now echoed with the sounds of their laughter, the playful shouts during their weekend games, and the soft lullabies he sang to them before bed. They were becoming a family, and Jackson had never felt more fulfilled. But despite the newfound warmth in his home, there were still moments that pulled him back into the harsh reality of the world they had left behind. One day, after school, Lily came home with a look of concern etched on her face. She was quiet as she sat at the kitchen table, staring down at her homework. Jackson noticed immediately, his heart sinking. "Lily, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice gentle but full of concern. She hesitated, fidgeting with her pencil before looking up at him. "I heard some kids talking at school," she said quietly. "They said that my real mom is going to take me back. They said you're not my real dad, and I'll have to leave you." The words hit Jackson like a wave, but he quickly composed himself. He didn't want Lily to see his fear, though he felt it deep inside. He had promised her that she would never have to go back to that place. "Lily," he said softly, moving to sit beside her. "You're not going anywhere. You are my daughter now. And nothing will change that. Your real mom. She lost that right a long time ago." He reached out, taking her hand in his voice steady and strong. "The people at school don't know what we've been through. They don't know how much I love you, how much I will always protect you." Lily's eyes were full of confusion and hurt. "But what if she does come back?" she whispered. Jackson's heart broke for her. He knew this fear wasn't going to go away overnight. The pain of her past was still so fresh, and despite all the love he had shown her, there were moments when it felt like that dark chapter would never truly close. "I promise you," Jackson said firmly, "I will never let her hurt you again. We're a family now, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you stay safe." Lily looked at him, and though she didn't say anything, he could see the trust in her eyes. She wasn't completely convinced, but she was beginning to believe him, and that, Jackson realized, was all he could ask for. The next few days were filled with subtle changes. Jackson noticed that Lily clung to him more, even in the quiet moments. She wanted to know he was there, and for the first time, Jackson allowed himself to feel what it was like to be needed. It was both a gift and a responsibility he hadn't fully understood until now. One night, after tucking both girls into bed, Jackson found himself sitting alone in the living room, reflecting on everything that had happened. His thoughts drifted back to his own childhood, to the emptiness that had defined his early years. He had built an empire, but for all his success, he had never felt truly loved. Now he had two little girls who had not only given him the chance to be a father, but had also shown him what it meant to be a family. They had healed him in ways he hadn't realized he needed. He thought about how far they had come since that first night, the night they had arrived at his doorstep in need of help, frightened and alone. He thought about their first smiles, their first laughs, their first steps toward healing. And in that quiet moment, as the soft glow of the lamp illuminated the room, Jackson made a vow to himself. He would never stop fighting for them. He would be the father they needed, the protector they deserved, and the constant in their lives. There was no turning back now. As the weeks went on, the fear that had once gripped Lily's heart slowly began to fade. She started to open up more, to trust in the future they were building together. Grace, too, was showing signs of blossoming. Though still quieter than Lily, Grace began to express herself more, and her laughter filled the house more and more each day. But Jackson knew they still had a long way to go. The fear wasn't gone, and the past was never fully erased. He continued to make sure they felt safe, heard, and loved. He took them on more outings, continued their therapy sessions, and made sure they knew he would never give up on them. One Saturday afternoon, Jackson decided to take the girls on a trip to the zoo. The sun was shining brightly, and the day felt perfect for a family outing. As they walked through the park, hand in hand, Jackson looked down at Lily and Grace, who were both smiling up at the animals in awe. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride in how far they had come. He had never expected to be here, standing in this moment with them. He had never imagined that this was the life he could have, one filled with laughter, love, and the kind of joy that only family could bring. As they walked past the elephant exhibit, Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, can we go see the giraffes next?" she asked, her eyes wide with excitement. Jackson smiled, ruffling her hair. "Of course, sweetheart," he said. "We can see all the giraffes you want." And as they continued their journey through the zoo, Jackson realized something that filled him with peace. They were finally free. Free from fear, free from the past, and free to be the family they had always dreamed of. And no matter what happened next, Jackson knew one thing for certain: he would always be there for them. No one was ever going to take them away from him. They were his family now, and that was all that mattered. Asterisk. Asterisk. Little girls begged, "Don't let mommy hurt us again." What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Asterisk. Asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The months that followed the zoo trip were filled with moments of healing for Lily, Grace, and Jackson. The small but significant moments, like Grace asking for her favorite bedtime story or Lily confidently walking into school with a smile, reminded Jackson of how far they had come. It wasn't easy, and the road was still long, but Jackson knew that they were on the right path. He had done everything in his power to make them feel loved, safe, and secure. He was their father now, and he would always protect them. But despite the progress, a shadow still hung over them, something neither Jackson nor the girls could escape, those haunting memories of the past. Jackson could see it in Lily's eyes sometimes, the way she would freeze at a sudden sound or flinch when someone got too close. He had learned to be patient, understanding that healing wasn't linear. Grace, still so young, was more resilient. But there were times when she clung to him a little longer than before, as if needing to remind herself that he wasn't going anywhere. He had noticed a shift in their relationship too. Over time, Lily had become more vocal about her fears, while Grace began to show more affection. They were starting to understand the concept of family, of trust, and it was evident in every small gesture. One night, as Jackson was tucking Grace into bed, she whispered something that made his heart ache. "Dad," she said, her small voice barely audible. "I'm glad we're home now." Jackson paused, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I'm glad too, sweetie," he said softly. "We're safe here, and you and Lily will always have a home with me." She nodded, her eyes fluttering closed as she snuggled deeper into her blankets. But Jackson could still hear the tremor in her voice, the lingering doubt that she hadn't quite let go of yet. Jackson stood there for a moment, watching her sleep, and then moved to Lily's room. When he opened the door, he saw Lily sitting on the edge of the bed, her legs crossed, looking out the window. "You okay?" he asked gently. She didn't look at him right away, but he could see the hesitation in her posture. Finally, she spoke. "Do you think she'll ever come back?" Lily asked, her voice quiet, almost afraid to ask the question out loud. Jackson felt his chest tighten. He had prepared himself for this moment. The moment when Lily would voice her fears again. "Lily," he said, sitting down beside her, "I know you're scared, but you're safe now. I'm not going to let her hurt you again. And you know what?" Lily looked at him, her wide eyes filled with both hope and fear. "What?" she asked. "We're a family now," Jackson said with conviction. "And families stick together. No one's taking you away from me, Lily. Not now. Not ever." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she hugged him tightly, burying her face in his chest. Jackson held her, feeling the weight of her fear, but also the deep trust she was placing in him. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he could build a future for them, one filled with love and security. The next morning, they sat down at the breakfast table, and for the first time in a long while, Lily seemed at peace. She was talking to Grace, telling her about the animals she had learned about in school, and Grace was listening with wide eyes, completely engrossed in her sister's stories. Jackson couldn't help but smile. This was it. This was the family he had always wanted. As the days passed, the bond between them grew stronger. Lily and Grace became more open, more trusting. They would talk to him about their worries, their dreams, and sometimes even their fears. And Jackson did his best to listen, to reassure them, and to make them feel like they belonged, because they did. They belonged to him, and he belonged to them. But just as things seemed to settle, an unexpected letter arrived. Jackson was sitting at his desk, reviewing some paperwork, when the mail arrived. He opened the envelope, expecting it to be just another bill or advertisement, but his hands froze when he saw the contents. It was a letter from the court. A new hearing had been scheduled, and this time, the stakes were even higher. The letter stated that Lily and Grace's biological mother was appealing the custody ruling, claiming that the court had made an error in awarding Jackson full custody. Jackson's heart sank as he read the words. He had known this could happen, but he had hoped it wouldn't. He knew it was going to be another battle, and this time, he couldn't afford to lose. The girls had come so far. They had found safety, love, and stability in his home, and he wasn't about to let it all slip away. He immediately called his lawyer, setting up a meeting to prepare for the upcoming hearing. He knew it wasn't going to be easy, but he would do whatever it took to keep his daughters safe. Later that evening, he sat down with Lily and Grace, the weight of the news hanging heavy in the air. He could see the fear return to Lily's eyes, and Grace's usually carefree smile had vanished. "Dad," Lily said, her voice trembling, "are we going to be okay?" Jackson took a deep breath and held both of their hands. "Yes, Lily. We're going to be okay," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I won't let anyone take you away from me. I'll fight for you, and we'll get through this, together." And as he looked at the two girls, the strength in their faces gave him the courage he needed. No matter what happened in the days ahead, he knew one thing for sure: he would never stop fighting for them. They were his daughters now, and no one would take them away. Not now. Not ever. Asterisk. Asterisk. Little girls begged. "Don't let Mommy hurt us again." What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Asterisk. Asterisk. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. As the days passed, Jackson found himself consumed by the looming custody battle. It was an intense period, full of long meetings with lawyers, endless paperwork, and the constant reminder that the safety of Lily and Grace was at stake. They had already been through so much, and he couldn't let them fall back into the hands of someone who had never truly cared for them. Jackson knew that they were his responsibility now, and no matter how difficult the road ahead, he would fight for them with everything he had. The morning of the hearing arrived, and Jackson woke up early, his stomach a tight knot of nerves. He had been preparing for this day for weeks, but the weight of the situation still felt overwhelming. Lily and Grace were still asleep when he left for the courthouse, but he had made sure to leave them with a note, something small but reassuring. "We're going to be okay. I'm fighting for you, and I'll always be here. Love, Dad." As he walked into the courthouse, he felt the familiar tension in the air. The courtroom was filled with the usual players, lawyers, witnesses, and a few onlookers, but the stakes felt higher today. This wasn't just a legal battle for custody. It was a battle for his family. Jackson took a seat at the table with his lawyer, his mind racing through the strategy they had planned. He had spent so much time thinking about the arguments, the evidence, and what he would say when it was his turn. But none of that mattered when he thought about Lily and Grace. They were the reason he was here. They were the reason he was fighting so hard. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Jackson listened intently as both sides presented their cases. His lawyer spoke about the girls' well-being in his care, the stability he had provided them, and the steps he had taken to make sure they were in a safe, loving environment. Then came the moment when the girls' mother's lawyer spoke, presenting a different narrative, one that portrayed Jackson as an outsider, someone who didn't have the right to keep the girls from their biological mother. The accusations were harsh, but Jackson remained calm, knowing that he had the truth on his side. His lawyer had prepared him for this moment, and he knew he had to stay focused. The moment came when it was Jackson's turn to speak. He stood up, his heart pounding in his chest, and faced the judge. The words were stuck in his throat for a moment, but then they came slowly at first, but with increasing clarity. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm not here today to argue that I'm perfect or that I'm a saint. What I'm here to say is this. Lily and Grace are my daughters now. They've been through things no child should ever go through, and they've found a home with me. I have promised them that I will always be here for them, and I intend to keep that promise. No one will take them away from me." The courtroom was silent as Jackson spoke, the weight of his words hanging in the air. He didn't need to mention the past. They already knew what had happened. What mattered now was the future. "I've seen the way they've changed since they've been with me," he continued, his voice softer now. "Lily is learning to trust again. Grace is smiling more than I've ever seen. They are safe with me, Your Honor, and they are thriving. All I want is for them to be happy, to be loved, and to have the life they deserve." Jackson sat down, his hands shaking slightly, but his heart full of conviction. He had said everything he needed to say. Now, it was up to the judge. The tension in the room was palpable, as the judge considered the evidence, the testimonies, and the arguments from both sides. It felt like an eternity. But finally, the judge spoke. "After reviewing the facts presented here today," the judge said, looking over the papers before him, "it is clear that the well-being of Lily and Grace is best served by remaining with Mr. Reed. The court finds in favor of Mr. Reed. The current custody arrangement will remain in place." Jackson's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. He had won. He had done it. He had kept his promise to the girls. He turned to see his lawyer nodding, a small but knowing smile on his face. The relief flooded over Jackson like a wave, and all he could think about was the look on Lily and Grace's faces when he would tell them the news. They were safe. They were home. As he walked out of the courtroom, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The battle was over, and he had won. He had secured their future, and he had given them the life they deserved. When he arrived home, Lily and Grace were waiting for him. They ran to him as soon as he walked through the door, their faces full of excitement and hope. Jackson knelt down to their level, his heart overflowing with emotion. "We did it, Dad," Lily said, her voice filled with relief. "We get to stay with you." "Yes, sweetheart," Jackson said, pulling them both into his arms. "We're together, and no one is ever going to take that away from us." And in that moment, surrounded by the two little girls who had become his world, Jackson knew that this was just the beginning of their new life together. A life full of love, hope, and the promise of a future that would never be torn apart again. Asterisk, asterisk. Little girls begged, "Don't let Mommy hurt us again." What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Months passed since the court ruling, and things had settled into a quiet rhythm for Jackson, Lily, and Grace. The girls were flourishing in their new life, and Jackson found himself more content than he had ever been before. He had given them a safe, loving home, and in return, they had filled his life with a joy he never thought possible. The bond between them was stronger than he could have imagined, and Jackson found himself cherishing every moment with them. But despite the peace that had settled over their home, there was still something unsettled in Jackson's heart. He could never forget the darkness of the past, the years when he had been alone, and the way the girls had been hurt by their mother. The haunting memories still lingered, and Jackson knew it would take time, years, perhaps, for them to fully heal. One evening, after dinner, Jackson sat down with Lily and Grace in the living room. The house was quiet, the soft glow of the fireplace casting a warm light across the room. Jackson had noticed that the girls had been a little quieter than usual, and he knew it was time to talk. He had always been open with them, and he had promised himself that he would never shy away from the tough conversations. "Hey, girls," Jackson began, his voice calm but firm. "I know things have been a lot better lately, but I want to make sure we're all doing okay. How are you two feeling?" Lily looked up from the book she was reading, and for a moment, Jackson could see the hint of hesitation in her eyes. She had been through so much, and even though she was smiling more often now, there were still moments when the weight of the past seemed to pull her back. "I'm okay," Lily said softly, her voice almost unsure. "But sometimes I still get scared. What if we lose you too?" Jackson's heart sank at her words, but he knew it was something they needed to address. "Lily," he said gently, "I know you're scared. You've been through a lot, and those feelings won't go away overnight. But I promise you, you're safe here. I'm never going to leave you. I'm your dad, and I'm here for you. Always." Grace, who had been sitting quietly beside Lily, suddenly spoke up. "I'm not scared," she said, her voice steady and confident. "I know you won't let anyone hurt us. You're our dad." Jackson looked at her, a proud smile crossing his face. Grace had always been the quieter one, but her words hit him in a way that he didn't expect. She was right. He had promised them both that he would always be there, and he would keep that promise, no matter what. "Thank you, Grace," Jackson said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're right. I will always protect you both, and you can always talk to me about anything, okay?" The girls nodded, their faces filled with the kind of trust that only comes from being in a safe, loving home. Jackson felt a sense of relief wash over him. It was moments like these small, quiet moments that made everything worthwhile. They didn't have to be perfect, but they were together. That was all that mattered. As the evening wore on, the girls seemed to relax a little more. Lily smiled as she picked up a drawing she had been working on, and Grace, who had been quieter, began to ask Jackson about the stars. They were talking about things that kids should talk about, simple things, full of wonder and curiosity. And Jackson realized that they were finally starting to live the childhood they deserved. A childhood filled with safety, love, and joy. As Jackson tucked the girls into bed that night, he kissed them both on the forehead, his heart full. He knew that their journey wasn't over, that there would still be tough times ahead. But he also knew that they had built something beautiful together. They were a family now, a real family, and nothing would ever change that. As he closed the door to their rooms and turned off the lights, Jackson stood in the hallway for a moment, his thoughts drifting. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. He had come a long way from the lonely man he once was. And in this house, filled with the laughter and love of his two daughters, Jackson had found something he had spent his whole life searching for: a family. And no matter what the future held, he would fight to protect that family, just as he had promised. Because that was what family was. It was about love, sacrifice, and a commitment to stand by each other, no matter what. And as he walked back to his room, Jackson knew that his journey had only just begun. There would always be challenges, always moments of doubt, But with Lily and Grace by his side, he knew they could face anything. Together, they were unstoppable. Asterisk, asterisk. Little girls begged, "Don't let mommy hurt us again." What the Millionaire CEO did next is unreal. Asterisk, asterisk. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. As the years passed, Jackson watched Lily and Grace grow, their lives unfolding with more happiness than he could have ever imagined for them. The trauma of their past was still there, lingering in the background, but it no longer defined them. They were no longer the scared little girls who had arrived at his doorstep with nowhere to go. They were thriving, finding their own voices, and becoming the people they were always meant to be. Jackson couldn't help but marvel at how much they had healed. Lily had become more confident, her laughter filling the house more and more as the years went by. She no longer flinched at loud noises or shrank from affection. Grace, who had always been quieter, was now opening up, her sweet smile lighting up the room with a newfound joy. Jackson had been there for every milestone, every step forward. He had supported them through the tough moments and celebrated with them through the victories, no matter how small they seemed. It wasn't just about keeping them safe anymore. It was about helping them build a future, one full of love, hope, and possibilities. One afternoon, Jackson was sitting in his office, going through some paperwork, when Lily came in, holding something in her hands. "Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. Jackson looked up from his desk, smiling as he saw her standing there, holding a letter. "Of course, sweetheart. What's up?" Lily took a deep breath, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I got into the college I wanted to go to. They accepted me." Jackson stood up, his heart swelling with pride. It was a moment he had hoped for, a moment he had always dreamed of for her. "Lily, that's amazing," he exclaimed, pulling her into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you." Lily smiled, her face glowing with happiness. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad," she said softly. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Jackson felt a lump in his throat. The journey they had been through together had been long, and at times, painful. But seeing her stand there, so full of promise and hope, made it all worthwhile. "You've worked so hard for this, Lily," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've earned every bit of it, and I'll always be here for you, no matter where life takes you." As they hugged again, Jackson felt a deep sense of peace. The pain of the past, the struggles they had faced, seemed so distant now. The girls were no longer the frightened children they once were. They were strong, independent, and ready to take on the world. Later that evening, after dinner, Jackson sat down with Grace. She was still his little girl in many ways, but there was a maturity to her now that had come with time. She had grown into a young woman, wise beyond her years, and Jackson was proud of the person she had become. "Dad," Grace said, her voice soft but steady, "I've been thinking about the future, about what I want to do with my life." Jackson smiled, his heart full of love for her. "What do you have in mind, Grace?" he asked. Grace hesitated for a moment, then looked him in the eye. "I want to help kids like me," she said. "I want to work with children who've been through what I've been through. I want to give them hope, like you gave me." Jackson's eyes welled up with tears. He had always known that Grace was a special soul, But hearing her express her desire to give back filled him with a sense of pride he couldn't describe. "That's an incredible goal, Grace," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're going to make a difference in so many lives, just like you've made a difference in mine." As the evening came to an end, Jackson sat back in his chair, looking at the two young women who had become his world. They had been through so much together, and now they were on the verge of a new chapter in their lives. They were no longer defined by their past. They were the authors of their own futures. Jackson thought back to that first night when he had taken them in, when they were just two scared, broken little girls. They had changed his life in ways he could never have imagined. And in turn, he had given them the love and stability they needed to thrive. It had been a journey, a difficult one, but a rewarding one. And as he watched them take their first steps toward their own futures, he knew that this was just the beginning. They had come so far, and there was so much more to look forward to. "Thank you, Dad," Lily said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. "For everything." Grace nodded in agreement, her eyes full of love. "We're so lucky to have you." Jackson smiled, his heart overflowing with emotion. "No," he said softly, "I'm the lucky one." He knew that, no matter what the future held, they were ready. Together, they had built a family that could weather any storm, and nothing would ever take that away from them. Not now. Not ever.